Good morning, friends. We're so glad to have you join us this morning. Thank you for being with us. We're excited to share a conversation with Andrew and Michael this morning. Welcome. We're going to wait a few moments for all of our guests to join, and then we'll begin formally. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll begin momentarily with our presentation from Andrew and Michael. So glad you're with us. Stand by. Good morning, friends. We're so glad you're here with us. We are preparing to have a conversation. Latest FEI survey proves resiliency of freedom economy, and we are so pleased to have this conversation with Andrew and with Michael and all the news that they have to share with us. We're going to wait one more minute for others to join, and then we will begin our conversation. Well, thank you, friends, for joining us this morning. I know it's early for those of you on the West Coast, but we really appreciate your joining and participating with us. We're so pleased today to be joined by two dynamic young leaders changing the economic landscape in America. Together, they have launched a monthly Freedom Economy Index that surveys the opinions of small business owners across the country. This is the fourth monthly survey, and we are so pleased that they're here to share it with us. Let me take a moment to introduce them to you. Andrew Crapuchettes is a pioneer in the labor market data and analytics industry, and he's the visionary behind RedBalloon. Andrew began his career as a young Silicon Valley entrepreneur, building business process automation and selling 3D modeling software. In 2001, Andrew became a founding member and later CEO of MC, now Lightcast, which he transformed from a little-known consulting company of 3 employees to an international economic data firm with over 250 employees worldwide. He not only pioneered the operational tenets that rocketed MC to success, but led the company through 4 successful transitions to 2 private equity firms, a strategic buyer, and a national nonprofit, with each transition producing significant returns for his investors. He's taught graduate level classes on 3D modeling and software architecture, and has served on the board of multiple national organizations. He and his wife live in Idaho with their 5 children. We're also joined by Michael Seifert, who is the founder, CEO, and president at PublicSquare. Michael is a recognized thought leader in the areas of business development, politics, and culture. Michael has a proven track record of growing businesses with experience as the head of marketing for a notable recreation equipment firm with over $1 billion in assets and $3 billion in sales. He also has a proven track record for leadership as the executive director of a university program for one of the most successful nonprofit organizations in the United States. Michael lives in Carlsbad, California, with his wife, Sarah Gable, and their daughter, Lily. And I have failed to introduce myself. My name is Shannon Royce. I'm the president and CEO of Christian Employers Alliance, an alliance of Christian-owned businesses. So our businesses are a subset of the businesses being discussed today from this survey. So we are so pleased to have Michael and Andrew join us this morning. We will be taking Q&A at the end of this presentation. So if you'll please post your questions down in the Q&A section, we'll get to as many questions as we can. And we look forward to hearing now from Andrew. Take it away.
Great. Good morning and thank you. Nice to be with everybody this morning. We're going to go through the Freedom Economy Index. And I am going to kind of run you through some of the details of what we're trying to accomplish here. And then Michael's going to jump in as needed to talk about the ways that we are thinking about this economy. It is really interesting right now. As you know, many people in the liberal media believe that everybody on the right, all the conservatives, all the Christians, really don't have an opinion worth talking about, and therefore they don't talk about it. And they want all of us to feel like we're alone and we're the only ones that think the way that we do, and we're all idiots. And so what we wanted to try and accomplish with the Freedom Economy Index is to give a voice to the businesses that are all over this country that are striving to build their business and thus build the economy and provide the services and the goods that you need so that we're not beholden to big companies who hate our worldview. And so this is a pretty comprehensive survey, and we're doing it every month. If you'd like to participate in the Freedom Economy Survey, you can go sign up at PublicSquare or at RedBalloon. It doesn't cost anything to be part of this. And if you want to have your voice heard by the mainstream media, by people in DC as part of this Freedom Economy Index, I would encourage you to do so. So let's jump into it. Methodology, we talked to over 70,000 businesses as part of this survey, and we were able to glean information from them on economic sentiment. We're going to talk about higher education and a variety of topics. Michael, do you want to add anything to why we're doing this the Freedom Economy Survey before I jump into results?
I think the only thing I would add, Andrew, because you nailed it, is that the voice of small businesses in this country has been largely ignored. Our political system out of DC is truly structured to focus purely on the major corporate interests of our country that today, unfortunately, are running in lockstep with the regime out of Washington, D.C. So when you have lobbyists that are essentially directing policy, the voices of small businesses get left behind. The Chamber of Commerce has become largely obsolete. And so it's up to us as people that love this country, the Constitution, the values that it protects, and the small business community that embraces these more Judeo-Christian values. It's up to us to make sure that the interests and the values of these businesses are represented in the public arena. So this is a great way for us to do that. And we hope that as you review these results, you're able to focus on the small businesses in your community and think, I wonder if they feel this way too. And I definitely want to help them in this challenging economic season.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so first thing, as you can imagine, when you read polls coming out of all the Gallup or all the major polling centers, they don't ask things like, do you think the economy, the U.S. is on the right or wrong track right now? But our small businesses, the people who are living in the results of the bad policy coming out of D.C. right now, strongly believe that the U.S. is on the wrong track, whether that's, and we're going to go into inflation, economic conditions, et cetera. So if you think that the economy is on the wrong track, if you think the U.S. is on the wrong track, you are not alone. Many of them believe that we are heading into a major recession, although interestingly, in October, this ticked down just a little bit. And I think that people are thinking that the Fed might be, everyone everyone knows the Fed is actually a political organization. And as we go into a presidential election season, it is likely that the Fed will try and do things to juice the economy to make it look better for whoever is in DC right now. But there is a great number of the people in our survey that believe that we are going into a recession right now. And that is sometimes when you believe something, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think that there's some real significant economic headwinds that these small businesses are facing, and that's what they're feeling in this right now. Optimism over the next 6 months. This is unfortunately, as you can see, this is also trending down. If you look back in July, 50% of the people in the Freedom Economy Index were pretty optimistic that over the next 6 months, they were going to accomplish great things in their business. They might be very concerned about the economy, concerned about what's coming out of DC, but they had this resiliency and this optimism on their own business and what they wanted to accomplish there. And unfortunately, that has ticked down pretty significantly over the last couple of months. It is funny how politics does drive a lot of the optimism that these businesses have, but also as they face the headwinds of inflation and regulation and tight labor markets and taxes, it starts to become harder and harder to be optimistic about how your business is going to succeed over the next 6 months.
And Andrew, one point I'd note here is that this doesn't just mean that the business owner then faces the negative ramifications of the challenging economic times. Remember, as we're reviewing this, that when we're saying that 28% of businesses feel optimistic about their next 6 months, that means their employees, their consumers, they're all bunched into this one kind of bucket perspective here. So when business owners are saying that, hey, I'm concerned about the next 6 months, that's going to have a very strong reverberating effect to how they price their goods, how they continue to market and advance, how they serve their community. So remember that as we are, yes, polling business owners, there are so many peripheral effects and other voices that are represented here through the findings of this survey.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so then we asked people, are they planning to hire or are they planning to just hold tight? And I found this very interesting. So I'll highlight this one down at the bottom. You're not planning to hire or reduce staff. And this went from 53% to 68%. And I think what that is these are a lot of employers who felt the pain and anguish over the last couple of years of trying to find people, it was a tight labor market and it was hard to find staff. Now that they have a lot of economic uncertainty in front of them, they don't want to continue to hire, but they don't want to lose those good people. I think the other point that's worth pulling out here is that a lot of these businesses, these are distinctly Christian or conservative businesses, and they care about their people. And so they would rather take the hit themselves as a business owner to make sure that they can hold on to their people as long as possible. So, but it also shows that many of these companies, so only 12% are planning to expand their team and are in growth mode right now. That's not a good sign for our economy because the economy needs the small businesses that are the lifeblood of our economy. So, but this is what they're thinking right now about hiring. Okay, so let's talk about inflation and federal policy. This is, we've gotten a lot of news coming out of the, whether it's DC or major news outlets, that inflation is under control. The Fed is celebrating that they've been able to make more people unemployed and put more businesses out of business. And but a lot of our businesses who are actually buying things, they're in the trenches. They are feeling the weight of inflation, believe that inflation is going to continue to be higher than normal over the next period, over the next 6 months. And again, 87%, this is not just a small percentage of these businesses. They're feeling the lack of buying power that they have within their business when they're buying from their vendors, from their suppliers. So unfortunately, this is probably a tighter and more accurate reality of what inflation in America is today than a lot of the numbers that are coming out of the BEA. And also, as you have the opportunity, you're welcome to go and download the results of this report. You can go to RedBalloon.work/freedom economy. And again, this joint project of PublicSquare and RedBalloon, but you can grab it there and you can see all the verbatim responses of what people are actually saying, which I think is really fascinating. Then we asked them, what's caused this inflation spike, right? We've heard a lot of The Biden economy will sometimes say, well, it's all the economic activity. People are spending a lot of money. But the reality is 0.1% of our businesses believe that consumer overspending is the problem. It is government overspending that is the problem. When they are spending away our future and they are printing money like a drunken sailor, maybe that just has an impact on inflation that these businesses are feeling.
One other thing I'd mention too, Andrew, is that if you listen to the media, especially over the past 3 years, as they've talked about COVID-19, you'll hear them often blame the virus itself for economic downturn, overprinting, challenges in the labor market, et cetera. Here's what our businesses are actually saying, though. The pandemic did not cause any of that. It was the government's reaction to the pandemic that caused the economic challenges we're currently facing. So I think that's honestly mirroring of how many Americans feel. I think we're tired of hearing that it was the pandemic's fault. The reality is we had a choice of how we wanted to respond. We saw some states respond differently than others. And the states that embraced freedom and liberty and these principles of the Constitution are doing economically better now than the states like California or New York that really pressed the business community. And in cities like LA, for example, where 70% of the small businesses faced lasting and long-term shutdowns from the mandate period, it's very hard to recover from that. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually read a stat recently that there has not been a famine in the world in the last 100 years that has not been produced by government policy rather than weather conditions. So a lot of the economic hardship that happens in the entire world, not just in the US, is bad government policy. And unfortunately, this is no different. When you're looking at the government and you're a small business and you've been struggling to balance your budget with the rising inflation prices, we ask these businesses, what should we do about the debt and spending? And basically, should we compromise on some things and raise the debt ceiling and figure it out, or should we just stop spending and try and figure out how to actually have a balanced budget and then maybe even start paying off some of that debt? Obviously, resoundingly, our businesses believe that the government should act and respond the way that they have to on a daily basis to be able to make their business continue to grow and continue to go. Do you believe the Federal Reserve strategy is driving the economy into a recession? 77% say absolutely. The Federal Reserve is actually what's driving us into a recession. It is not that we have consumer overspending or anything else. And they believe that the Federal Reserve is doing it on purpose. They are trying to tampen down a great economy. They are naming success as businesses going under and people being unemployed. And what institution should ever see that as success, that people are losing their jobs and families are on hardship or are more dependent on the government? But it does look a lot like that's the way that they're pushing things right now. Okay, supplier prices, and this is a big part of inflation right now. But when you get the inflation numbers coming out of the BLS or the BEA, they're saying that, inflation is in pretty good shape right now. But we ask people, what have supplier prices done in the last 30 days? Not in the last 6 months or 12 months. What in the last 30 days? In the last 30 days for our businesses who are just trying to run their business, 76% say that their supplier prices have increased in the last 30 days. That is way more dramatic than the inflation numbers that are being reported, and should be an indication of what's actually happening in the economy right now.
Yeah, and Andrew, I would think that this is honestly one of the most sobering slides in this entire presentation, because as you described, often we see price changes over the course of a longer period of time. If you ask most Americans, hey, is this package of eggs more expensive than when you bought it 6 months ago? People will say yes, absolutely. But rarely is it that you'd have this large of a quantity of folks saying my goods that I'm purchasing that I have to pass on to consumers are more than they were just 30 days ago, especially given the fact that we've had a year of these price increases now. This reminds me of the early stages of Zimbabwe, Weimar Germany, Argentina, these other famous countries where you hear these stories of folks saying, yeah, it's like every time I went back to the grocery store, week after week, the prices were higher. That's a negative sign And I'm also concerned that the media seems rather hesitant to report that reality. Why does it take a survey like this to hear that stark of a wake-up call?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we go into that over the last 12 months as well. I think this top one is pretty striking, that 34% of our businesses say that their supplies have changed, their supplier costs has changed more than 20% in the last 12 months. So again, that was the 30-day outlook. This is the 12-month outlook. These businesses are saying that there's not just a little bit of a price increase, there's a dramatic price increase. So 34% over 20%, 37%, 10 to 20%. So dramatic price increase, way more than what the inflation numbers are reporting right now. If you look at how are we handling higher costs of supplies, a lot of these businesses, they're in communities, right? They feel they feel like they need to take care of the people around them, of the consumers, and so many of them are absorbing a lot of these price changes. And you can see 18% are absorbing 100% of these price changes, and then a vast majority are trying to split the difference between the people that are buying their goods and services and their business. That means that these business owners are trying to take a hit for their community, and then some of them don't have the margin to be able to do that, and so 23% say they have to pass 100% of this onto their consumers, which is you and I. So this is also sobering that these businesses are doing their best, but there's only so much they can do to keep prices in check.
Andrew, this to me is just such a good reminder that this business community that's been assembled through Red Balloon and PublicSquare, these are truly salt of the earth, family owned and operated, great businesses that deserve our support. Do you think the answers would be the same on this survey slide here had we asked Target, Walmart, Amazon? Absolutely not. Amazon last week, actually, it was uncovered in a 4-year investigation by the FTC that they've been secretly raising prices when consumers are paying attention, dropping prices when consumers are paying attention, and then raising them when they feel like their attention is gone, based around holidays, Prime Day, things like this, Thanksgiving, Black Friday. So I would remind folks that this survey here shows the integrity of our business owners, that they're willing to take the hit in order to ensure that the customers are still having a positive experience. That, to me, is unique to this freedom economy.
Yep. Okay. We are wage inflation and AI. In the interest of time, we're going to jump through some of this. Political leadership, you're probably going to guess some of these things. I want to hit the higher education piece. And then I know we have some Q&A time, and then we need to let everybody get going with their day. Higher education, this one was pretty striking to me. Are colleges and universities graduating students with relevant skills that today's business community needs? 67% say strongly no, and another 24% say somewhat no. They're basically saying that this failed university system all over the U.S., and I'm sure many of them are focused on the Marxist anarchy-based state institutions, are not producing graduates with skills that are useful at any level. I think this one is striking. And then if you look at, are you more or less likely to consider a job seeker with a 4-year degree from a major college or university? Many of them say, no, I'm not. It doesn't matter. 41% say it doesn't make a difference to us. But then another 20% say strongly less, and another 20% say somewhat less. So that's an additional 40%. So over 80% of the respondents say either I don't care, or it is actually a detractor from your resume to have a degree from a major university. And think about that. If you're an employer, do you want to hire someone who's been indoctrinated for 4 years at a Marxist university and is being taught how to be an anarchist, and bring them into your company and bring them as part of your culture? So I think this is also a big shot over the bow for a lot of the universities that are charging ridiculous prices for something that increasingly consumers don't need. Now, there are great universities out there. There are Christian universities, whether it's Liberty or Hillsdale or New St. Andrews College, others that are probably not captured in these results. But I do think that this is an indication that small businesses want people that can work. They want a meritocracy. They don't care about that Princeton degree that's actually just going to cause more harm than good.
Hey, Andrew, you're an employer. I'm an employer. I'll say quickly that I'm actually feeling so strongly in alignment with these small businesses, I would go as far as to say that if I had the choice between a Hillsdale grad and a Harvard grad and all else is fairly equal, I'm immediately prioritizing the Hillsdale grad. Because if you
Absolutely.
graduated from Harvard these days, you've got to convince me why you still believe that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, because Harvard doesn't believe that. You've got to convince me that capitalism is still a good economic structure, because Harvard doesn't teach that. So I completely resonate, and I know you do as an employer as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We need to wrap things up, because I know Shannon wants to make sure that we finish things and that we have a opportunity for some questions. I would encourage you can go to RedBalloon.work/freedom economy. You can download all these results. You have an opportunity to speak into this. I would encourage you, if you're a business and you're not registered on PublicSquare and you're not part of this movement that's happening today, you're missing out. It's an opportunity to be in front of consumers at scale. It is an opportunity to be participating and encouraging everyone. Because remember, when you believe that you're alone, it's a lot harder to be courageous. But when you realize that you're part of a movement, you're part of something much bigger than yourself, it's a lot easier to stand up for what you know is right and be courageous. And so that would be our encouragement to you. That's what we're trying to accomplish with this Freedom Economy Index. And again, you can go and download it, RedBalloon.work/freedom economy. And you can grab all these results, and then you can start to participate in this survey and make sure that your voice is heard in the media, in DC. And thank you for your time. We're really grateful.
And guys, just before we begin the Q&A from our guests, take just 3 sentences and give me the nutshell of Red Balloon and a PublicSquare, because I don't want to assume that all of our members know who you are and know what you do. So tell us about those 2 important organizations. Andrew?
Michael, you want to start?
Oh, Michael.
Yes, would be happy to. PublicSquare is the largest network of patriotic, constitution-respecting businesses the world has ever seen. We have over 70,000 business vendors on our platform. You can find this marketplace that is going after Amazon with righteousness at the forefront at PublicSquare.com.
Nice.
And at RedBalloon.work, we are the nation's leading non-woke pro-freedom job board. We know that there is no freedom apart from Christ. And we want to see freedom in the workplace again. If you want your business to thrive, if you want to have a culture that you're excited about, that you want to go into the office and spend time with the people that you've hired, you want to go to RedBalloon.work. You can post jobs. We can do specific recruiting for you, or we have a resume database. We want to see the businesses that are in the freedom economy have the people they need to be very, very successful. And we're doing that at scale already.
Perfect. That's terrific. Thank you so much. And Andrew, you and I talked about this yesterday, but for purposes of setting the table here, how do you define a small business for purposes of the work of Red Balloon and PublicSquare?
Yeah, small businesses in America, that I think the technical definition is under 500 employees. That doesn't feel very small to me. I have run businesses that have gotten up and over 500 employees, and at that point, you don't feel small at all. In Red Balloon, we have a lot of businesses that are under 100 employees. That's kind of how we think about it, just because as I've run businesses that went from 3 employees to many hundreds of employees and was able to build them. Once you start to get past 50 and then 100 employees, the business changes. The business changes fundamentally. And so that's how we're thinking about it. And we've been able to bless them. Now, Red Balloon has businesses that are using our services that have many thousands of employees. In fact, we have publicly traded businesses using Red Balloon. But that's how we think about small businesses in America, is under 100 employees. Nice.
70% of the members of CEA are under 100 employees. So we know that just about our own numbers, 30% over 100 employees. And we have some very large businesses as well, but many of our businesses are even under 50 employees. So really important conversation you're having here. So talk to me about the obstacles and challenges that you see in this next 6 months. What do you think is the greatest concern in the minds of the businesses in this survey?
I'll start by saying that we're in a little bit of a catch-22 situation in our economy, given that businesses feel rather timid nobody quite wants to take the next step to grow. We're hesitant to spend ad dollars because what if the economy totally collapses? We're hesitant to hire more people. We don't want to fire people either. We're just kind of stagnant. But at the same time, with how fast prices are rising and with the challenges that are ongoing for a small business generally, they're still needing to invest in growth. Right. So you can't get too stagnant, and yet the risks that you take if you don't stay stagnant could end up, biting us in the rear here in a few months. So our greatest challenge we're witnessing in our small business community is that everyone's kind of on pause, and that's not a great thing for our economy.
Yeah, I would agree. And these businesses are striving to bless their communities, to bless their employees. But I think we're going to see over the next 6 months, I think the Fed is going to start to bring interest rates down. Again, I wish the Fed didn't have such a disproportionate impact on our economy, but they do. And so we're going to see interest rates are going to come down a little bit because because they are a political organization. That will start to free things up a little bit. I believe that the tight labor market is going to become front and center again about middle of next year. And we're going to see people pretty obsessed and focused on this presidential race. But a lot of our businesses, they're just trying to be faithful with what they have that's right in front of them, which is their business. And I think if the economy starts to move again, they're actually going to be well positioned, because I do think that there's a pendulum swinging back to the right, and anyone who has the courage and the bravery to be there first, I think is going to have an opportunity to succeed in a big way. So I'm optimistic for the long term, but I do think that we're going to have a bad Christmas season. And then I think as we go into next year, there is going to be some loosening up of the economy, call it middle of the year.
Yeah, I love what you just said, Andrew, have the courage.
Yeah.
I think both of you men have started something new that had to have been exciting and terrifying, right? Both of you have just recently done this, just in the last few years. So what advice would you give to that CEO, that business person who's in that part terror, part excitement, sense of calling place? What would you say to them in this moment? What would your advice be?
I'd have two quick pieces of advice. One is find great mentors. Find people who can pour into you, who have done this at scale in both trial and in success seasons. I think that's really important. Find people who can pour into your journey. It gives you that extra oomph and courage to continue running and pressing on, especially in the hard times. Second thing I would say is those feelings will never really go away. You're always going to have the mental opposition. You're going to always have more reasons you shouldn't do it than reasons you should. Right. You're always going to be able to create the boogeyman in your mind. And the best muscle to build is mental fortitude, continuing to press on, have healthy perspective, recognize that this too shall pass. And you're going to have a lot of those crossing the Rubicon style moments as you move forward in your business. And that's a part of it. It's what Andrew and I have been through. You're not alone. Every other entrepreneur that's built something at scale has been through it too. Just continue pressing on.
Yeah,
it's good.
And I would add to that, think of every great story that you've read, biblical stories, Tolkien, Lewis, all the great stories that you've read. The person who is remembered, the hero in the story, is obviously blessed by God. But also is the person who goes out and takes a risk and does a thing, right? We don't know the names of any of the hobbits that stayed back in Hobbiton and didn't go to Mordor and put a ring in a volcano, right? We just don't know them. And we are in a moment, I think, in American history where we are not going to be saved by our politicians. We're not going to be saved by the ruling elite class. We're going to be saved by people in the trenches building businesses that are faithful, that are hiring employees, that are letting those employees be free, that are serving customers, building products, innovating in our marketplace. That's actually how we save the economy. I was talking to a businessman in Florida, and he said, look, the politicians and even some pastors don't have the courage to save this country. And so it's up to the business people. We are the people who are going to have to strap in, be faithful, live our values out loud, and tell everyone it's okay to live your values out loud. Because if no one has heard someone say a clear thinking thing like a man is a man and a woman is a woman out loud before, and then you are the one who has the courage to say it, you've just given them courage, because they know that they are not the only ones doing that, and they can live their values out loud. When you do that for your employees, when you do that for the other employers around you, when you do that for your community, that's how we save our country. It's not some big thing. It's not some silver bullet. It's just lots of people being faithful. That's
Right.
always how God works in a nation.
Right. So good. So good. So what is the biggest challenge of the next 6 months? Do you think it's inflation? Do you think it's debt? Do you think it's the supply chain challenges? What do you think the biggest challenge is right now?
My perspective would be overspending in DC. I think as you look through these results, that seems to be the challenge. And Mike Johnson is in a hard position as the new speaker. And I would caution him. I would caution him to look at results like this, that businesses, yes, they care about what's happening overseas. They care about the border. They care about all that. But at the end of the day, they've got to run their own business. And so we have to make sure that they have an economic environment where they can prosper. I think that the concern that I have, if you're familiar with the airplane analogy, when an airplane loses cabin pressure, the mask drops down, and the pilot always says, put your mask on before you help your neighbor. My concern is that we as a nation will continue to put our neighbor's mask on first before our own. We will ignore Main Street. And in turn, we're building this behemoth of a problem behind the scenes. So I think government overspending in DC will cause a lot of problems and ramifications for years to come if we don't get it in check.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. It is government spending and bad policy, right? The way that you fix, remember, the Fed can only control one side of the supply demand curve. So they can have an impact on demand, but not on supply. And if you listen to the Fed chairman talk about it, he knows this, right? So they can say, hey, we're going to make it harder to get money. Therefore, projects are not going to happen. Therefore, there will be less demand for goods, services, and labor. But the reality that is prices are driven by supply and demand.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have when you make it very difficult to get energy, whether that's a pipeline, whether that's drilling, the two biggest costs in any economy are labor and energy. And if you make it hard to get energy, and we've had a policy of abortion for the last 50 years, so it's hard to get labor because we don't have enough people to get all the work done. And so the two most expensive pieces of the economy are driven by, unfortunately, more policy and decisions on that front. And so that is going to be a headwind for a very long time until we allow the U.S. economy to create its own energy, and until we figure out how to do immigration legally, where people come in and actually work and do it the right way. Until we have those two things, we are going to have a significant problem on the supply side for energy and labor, which are the two most important parts of the economy, most expensive parts of the economy. So I think that we're going to start to free up our economy a little bit. But as we spend all this money in Ukraine and Israel, again, Mike Johnson's in a tough spot. But the reality is we need to make sure that we get our own house in order before we start fixing everybody else's problems.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about considering that whole concept is that just as our business owners need to live their lives with courage and conviction, so do our policymakers, because they are in a really difficult place. Particularly right now, we're coming up to having a government shutdown if we don't have a budget. And so it is a very challenging season. You're exactly right. For Mike Johnson, leading cats through the tuna market basically is what he's trying to do right now. And that is a very challenging thing. We need to be praying for him. Well,
yeah, although Shannon, I want to one of the results that we didn't get a chance to look at, we asked our businesses, what should DC do? And the options were, get their head around some of the budget issues, or just go home for a year and stop doing damage. 55% said send them home. Even send them home with pay. We don't care. They'll do less damage being home with a real job. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that our consumers are sick of it. They don't trust the politicians anymore.
Well, the other thing to think about is that when our nation was founded, our legislators were citizen legislators, like many of our state legislators are, right? They had real jobs. They were farmers or ranchers or whatever, bankers. And then they came to DC to do policy for a brief period of time. And that is not the nature of what they do now. It is a 24/7 job, 365 days of the year. And so Yeah, so that was a very interesting result to me. Well, let's end on a more positive note. Because we all need to be encouraged, right? We're living in challenging days. The election that we just came through was discouraging on several fronts. So tell me the most encouraging trend that you are seeing right now in the freedom economy.
Can I go first, Michael?
Absolutely, you can.
I would say the most encouraging trend is Michael and I started these businesses, call it 2 years ago, call it less than 2 years ago. There are 70,000 businesses and well over 1 million consumers on PublicSquare today.
No.
That tells me that there is a shocking amount of demand for freedom in America. At RedBalloon, we have had over 3,500 businesses, and not all businesses are selling stuff all the time, or they're selling stuff all the time. They're not hiring all the time, but we have 3,500 businesses. We've had over 1.5 million job seekers on the site looking for freedom. There are people who are ready to make a move. And I think the freedom economy is actually a market opportunity, and it's the right thing to do. So if you're thinking about starting a business, build a business where you live your values out loud. And I think you're going to be a rallying point for your community and for your consumers. You might think that that's a bad idea. Well, we need to be neutral in business, but I don't think we are in that moment anymore. There's an opportunity right now to be part of the freedom economy, and it is growing like a weed. So a good weed. So I'd encourage you. That would be my encouragement. Is it's working right now, but we need more people jumping in.
Yeah, and I remember, Andrew, when you first started RedBalloon, because it was shortly after I came to CEA.
Yep.
It started as you and your mind, your dream, your vision,
Yep.
and you now have 30 employees.
That's right.
How
That's
exciting is that in just 2 years, your business has taken off so beautifully? And Michael, what you're doing, I'm excited to hear what you see as the most encouraging trend that may be similar to what Andrew shared.
Well, I don't think there'd be growth without hope.
Right.
If I wasn't hopeful, I would just fold the towel and I'd be done. I really have been inspired by the amount of hope coming out of this incredible network of Americans that are sick and tired of being lectured about progressive policy issues. They don't want to be lectured about gender when they're trying to shop for their kids at Target. They don't want to be funding abortion when they're just trying to buy a cup of coffee like Starbucks will do. Mm-hmm. Instead, they're actually wanting a list, a network, an entire community of hope-driven alternatives, and they're making the effort to actually go support those alternatives. After Bud Light did what it did, we saw an 800% increase in searches for beer on our platform. After Target did what it did, we saw an incredible leap of 300,000 new members coming to the platform, while Target had its first quarterly earnings miss in 6 years. When Ben & Jerry's did what it did, we had an entire campaign rallied around a local chain of ice cream stores in the Southeast that had them experiencing their best month on record. We are seeing over and over and over again that consumers are not just boycotting. That's fine and it's helpful, but they're actually taking the next step and moving their money towards somewhere more positive. You wouldn't do that unless you felt hope for a better future. Right. So we're seeing it and we're loving the testimonies coming out of this freedom economy.
It's really exciting, guys. I'm going to say this, even though it may sound silly to you. I'm just so proud of both of you. I'm so proud of what you're doing and just excited for you. I pray God's blessing over your work, over the continued prospering of your organizations. And I thank you for joining us today. Do you have any closing comments that you'd like to make for our guests today?
Keep running. Keep being a conscious consumer or employer or employee, putting your values at the forefront of all of your daily expenditures, interactions. I think this country will be fundamentally changed for the better as consumers vote with their wallet, with their time, with their energy. Your vote is not just limited to every 2 and 4 years. You can vote every single day with what you empower with your funds, your employment, your effort and energy. And I'm just so thrilled that, Shannon, you guys are doing what you're doing, because networks like this need to exist for the future of our republic. So I'm hopeful at the end of this call today.
That's great. Andrew?
I would just echo that. We are in a moment when it is fun to be brave. It's a little bit terrifying. but it's totally worth it. Michael and I could be doing some boring corporate job where we were making a ton more money.
Right.
And what would be the point? When 50 years from now, our kids look back, they're going to remember that their dads stood up for the right thing in business at this time.
Right.
And I would encourage everyone, do it. It's really fun.
That's exciting. Well, God bless you both. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the end of our webinar. We appreciate your time today. We will be sending out the link for you for the recording, and we're grateful for your taking time with us. Thank you. God bless you guys.